Looks like with Kurt and Jared joining us. Welcome.
Sorry for the late entrance.
It's straight up the hour. You're on it. But Patty, go ahead. Drive away. I'll be quiet.
No, this is great. And we do have a shortened time. And so I'm going to start right on the hour just because it's the legislative session. There's so much to do. And so it really is just this short 1 hour meeting. And we do have action items to be able to move through. So first, welcome. Who's our newcomers today? Michelle, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Michelle McComber. I'm the CEO of the Utah Medical Association.
Okay. And maybe for time's sake, if each of you could just in the chat box introduce your name and then who you represent so that Michelle can go through and maybe get some of those names connected to who you are. All of you are equally important and we love all of you and appreciate you serving. But in this tight time frame today, if we could do the rest of the introductions. Do we have anyone else that is new though? Okay. So we are going to, first of all, thank everyone for their time in coming today. We have the first item on the agenda is approving the minutes from December. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the December 7th, 2022 board meeting minutes. All in favor? Do we want to do a quick hands like that, or is that good for who's taking notes on the opposed and the in favor? Are we good with that?
Denise is nodding yes, so we're good.
Got to make sure that Denise is okay because she rules the meeting. So Denise, I got you. All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Kurt, was that an opposed or was that in favor? In favor. Okay, just making sure. Okay, looks like the voting is unanimous and the minutes are approved. So we're going to go to the second action item. And our second action item is, do we have Hanafe Oguz here? We do not. Okay. The board is taking action on the new appointment to the Educational Advisory Council, which is representing charter school principals, which is Hanafe Oguz. And he is a member of the Education Advisory Council. He was unanimously recommended, and it was unanimously recommended that the board approve his appointment to the council. I just want to read a short thing because it just is his accomplishments are amazing. Hanafe Oguz is executive director of Beehive Science and Technology Academy, a platinum level K-12 STEM school in Utah. Beehive Academy was awarded the Charter School of the Year in Utah in 2016 by the Association of Public Charter Schools. Beehive Academy was listed as the #1 best high school in Utah in 2021 by U.S. News. He was named Principal of the Year in 2012, Class Noble Educator of Distinction by the National Society of High School Scholars in 2016, and Best of State Utah in Principal category in 2017. And in 2021, Best Charter School Administrator in Utah. So I think he will just have a lot of additive value to this advisory committee. And we thank him for wanting to come on board. And right now we are accepting a motion to be able to add him to the advisory committee.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion to add Hanafe Oguz to the appointment to the Education Advisory Council representing charter school principals. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. So all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, looks like the voting is unanimous. So I think that's good for all of us. Let's see, who will be reaching out to Hanafe? Okay, let him know we are very impressed and feel lucky. So perfect. The next on our agenda is the strategic plan long format. So this is where we as members of the board will take action on the strategic plan link that was below. And I hope that all of you were able to take a look at it. And if we can have someone put that in the chat, that would be helpful. This format was requested by the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget, and the content is the same as other policies and plans previously approved by the board and was reformatted to meet the GOPB's new guidelines. So I'm hoping that all of you as board members had a chance to take a look at that prior to this voting. So do we have a motion? Do we have any questions first? I should be asking, do we have discussion to the motion? I've been going on. I've shortened the Roberts rules. I'm so sorry. Do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion. I do have something on page 8.
Okay,
Very minor, not substantive. Page 8 on the strategic plan where it says Utah Board of Education. Should be Board of Higher Education, not. Let's see, I probably should look at it. There was an error on that.
okay. So we could put the motion in there as amended. Do we have any other discussion to the motion? We never had a second to the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thanks. Kurt seconds it. We do have the discussion to the motion and a possible amendment to the motion. Any other discussion to the motion? Okay. We have a motion on the table to approve the action on the strategic plan and the format that was requested from the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget. We do have an amendment to that motion to make a technical change as needed. And so do we have, well, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those
Aye.
okay, those opposed? Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you. We have the council and board engagement follow-up, and this was a discussion from last time that everyone met, and it was talking about the role of the board, and it stemmed from the conversation that we had in the summer/fall of talking about board involvement and engagement. I'm going to do a brief update, and then Spencer's going to do a follow-up after we had some conversation with those that are on the committee. There was a pre-meeting. And then the pre-meeting was, what is the depth and scope and breadth of what this looks like? And then there was a meeting with those who were available during legislative time, which was hard to do, but we got some folks that were able to come to that meeting. And part of the discussion was if it's just about having a board member on a committee, it really doesn't really accomplish the goal of having true board engagement. And so as the discussion started, we started to talk about what are the bylaws, what is it that we're supposed to do now, how do we know which items are action items, which are information items, which need to go to a committee first, and what those roles and responsibilities are. So in looking over some of that, we had Rick Gaisford, who's had, I just love it when he's on any committee at all in support in any form. So he's on here right now and he knows that, but he has that experience of, being on the advisory boards and what that looks like. He also has experience with CETA and some other organizations that have gone through this and possibly started with the same question we did, which is what is the role of the board? How do we get more board engagement? What does it look like? And the parameters that go around that. And most of them, in order to get that true board engagement, actually started with the bylaws instead to say, where are we at? And as we reviewed the board bylaws that are currently on the website, they're pretty sparse. It's pretty sparse. And so we had some more conversation, and Spencer, he was going to get some information for us. So Spencer, do you want to follow up?
Yeah, thanks to Rick. We were referred to a gentleman named Elwood Downing. He's done significant consulting work with other public networks across the country. He spent 23 years in Michigan. Jim, he knows Joe Schwalski really well there. He's in North Carolina now. And he's done a lot of work in analyzing or consulting with board governance. And thanks to Rick in that referral, we had an initial conversation, Laura and I, an initial conversation with him yesterday, and Laura has sent him kind of our relevant materials and statute and links. And from there, he was going to give us a statement of work. I think the action item here is if the board feels like this would be beneficial in terms of engaging with a consultant like this. We don't have a price range yet. We could have one probably within the week. And maybe from there, maybe it's a quick Zoom or something like that. Or if you just want to pre-approve an action like that. But that's kind of the big question, I think, right, Patty, is if a consultant would help us assess things a little bit in terms of the board engagement and the way the board interacts with the advisory councils and the process by which agenda items are placed and so on. So I think that's the overriding question.
Yes. And Rick, if you could maybe talk about your experience. At first we were like, we probably don't need that because we just need this little thing done. But in looking at what that little thing is, it would have also minimal impact. So if we really want to be able to do it well and create this ability to do this, Rick, do you want to talk about that experience, where it started and then where it went?
So I've served for, thank you, Patty. I've served for a number of years on the CETA, which is it's a membership organization representing state education agencies in education technology. And as a board, we were looking at our governance and how do we interact with our membership? How do we, what a variety of different things, but we really started looking at, we really got to go back to the foundational documents. And so Elwood was brought in he was known to our executive director, and she brought him in on as a consultant to help us to go through that process. And we wouldn't have I think the good bylaws and some of the direction that we have if we hadn't have had his assistance. It was just simply, it allowed us to be able to talk, and he was able to listen and then be able to get things into place. But it put us, what we did is we then went through all of our foundational documents, our governance, and how we're organized, the committees that we have, and how do those get organized, and then you start looking at the policies and that govern the organization, which we're still in the middle of. And now he's helping us with some of those policy things, as well as getting certain policies in place that we needed to have. Again, this is sort of a different entity, but he understands governance, and he also understands he understands UETN because of his background in Michigan and North Carolina and the work that he's done there. He's well aware of what we do.
Vice Chair Norman,
Yes,
could I be recognized? This is Jason Strait. I'm at UETN.
absolutely, Jason.
I would make a motion that UETN enter into contracted services with Elwood Downing to develop and strengthen the bylaws for board engagement.
We can't hear you.
There
Oh.
is a motion on the table. Do we have a second to that motion? And then we'll have discussion.
I have a question, and maybe this is why it's not being seconded. I know, I apologize, I'm new. But wouldn't we want to have know what the cost is going to be before we actually move forward? I would feel more comfortable just knowing what the cost is going to be.
Any other discussion to the motion? The motion was not seconded, so I have so is that another motion then, Michelle? So would the motion be to, I'll make it up and you say, is the motion to direct
I can
staff to
say.
get, okay.
I would make a motion to get some cost information and then the scope of what this individual would do and bring it back to the board. I understand that Rick explained kind of what that person is doing for them, but I would feel more comfortable as a board member just to have that information.
So would the motion be to direct staff to get additional information, including cost and scope of work, to enter into a contract of services to develop and strengthen bylaws for board engagement?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, the motion, do we have discussion to that motion?
Yes,
Laura.
sorry to interrupt. And Michelle is wonderful, and I love that she's part of the advisory council, but we would need a board member to make the motion.
Okay,
Oh, apologize. I honestly don't know what my role is. Nobody told me here. So it would be helpful if I had that. Sorry.
I think it's funny that the motion was about board engagement and you were engaged, so that's great.
I loved it. Yes, Jared.
I'll make that motion. Sounds like a good motion, so.
Okay, we have that motion. And do we have a second to the motion?
Yeah, I'll still second that motion.
Okay, thank you. So do we have discussion to the motion?
I would just concur with what Michelle expressed. I'd like to understand a little bit more what the scope and the cost would be and what is the expected benefit of it. We have some bylaws, they're short. Do they need to be longer? Do we have engagement? Is it good enough? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, so we have a motion on the table to direct staff to get additional information, including cost and scope of work, to enter into a contract of services to develop and strengthen bylaws for board engagement. All those in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And we don't have a time on here, but I'm wondering if that time frame wise, could that be brought back next time, or is that too soon to do a scope of work and all of that? I'm not sure what the RFP process is at UETN and how long that might take.
Depending on the cost, it could be as quick as a couple of weeks. In fact, if we were to wait till the next board meeting, that could prolong things, at least in terms of what the board might be looking for. So if there's something we wanted to do before that scheduled board meeting, maybe a quick scheduled board meeting virtually to approve a statement of work or a contract before the next meeting, that may be something to consider.
I guess what is the perceived problem and the perceived urgency? I mean, if we're having our bylaws reviewed and our board structure reviewed, I mean, what is the perception of the urgency, I guess?
Do you want me to answer that, Patty, or comment? So this was something I brought to the board at the last meeting. And I think scope is very important on this. I don't think we're suggesting a wholesale rewrite of bylaws or a wholesale revision of the board's makeup. I think the focus primarily is on the engagement of the advisory councils in relation to the board itself. And if there's things we can do to enhance that engagement, for example, to more formally have board members be a part of the advisory councils and then be a representative voice back to the board is just one idea. So it's more kind of some practical adjustments. But as Patty mentioned, there's also, it sounds like there's some questions or thoughts around broadening that. How far we broaden that, I think, is where it's probably not quite as clear, because that could go really broad really fast. But I think the primary, or at least the initial focus, was on the engagement between the advisory councils and the board.
And if I can follow up as well, point of privilege. Thank you, Spencer. I think the other part of this is that may be a possible 360 within UETN itself. And so it's a good time to press reset or restart to say, what does that look like with board member engagement as well? Being able to say what is how things are on the agenda, to be able to have really good, robust committee work, and then have that advocacy of having, what does that look like as far as board members on those committees and bringing it back. There's also some areas as to what is an action item, what is an information item, some of those parameters that we do have a little bit of detail. And then what are those, how are things discussed or populated and whatnot. So as we were going through some of the bylaws, some of that information is really missing. And so just having that overview of the work. So the scope could be quite small. It could just be a refresh, which is what we were looking at, is just kind of that refresh. It wasn't an overhaul of the complete system. It was just filling in some of those holes and gaps and moving that forward. I don't personally, so this is just me speaking, think that it is of high urgency at this moment during the legislative session. So just me speaking, I would think that it would be okay to go to our next board meeting. That's just me. Any other discussion?
Sounds good to me.
All right, so let's move to the next agenda item. And I just want to say one more thing. It was 100% discussed in our meeting that no one wants to micromanage the amazing work that UETN staff is doing. That was stated. Laura, you were there. Spencer, you were there. It was stated that is not the intent or purpose of this in any way whatsoever. We have the wireless retreat, and this is a discussion item, and we have board member Jason Strait that is going to lead us in this discussion.
Tim, would you mind?
Good morning, everybody. I'm joining from not virtual, but I'm here at UETN because I'm up at the legislature and just thought I'd run up here. But UETN hosted a Future of Wireless retreat workshop January 17th through the 19th at Bryce Canyon. And the vision of this was to explore ways discover cutting edge wireless solutions to enhance learning and the research environment. And the strategy is to work with wireless equipment providers and stakeholders. So what we're doing is right now, UETN has been working throughout the state with CBRS LTE. And we've been also working with providers such as Centricom to do proof of concept of using the LTE space. And I know Dave Long is on our board also, and they have successfully bid for some LTE spectrum. And this falls right in line with what we're trying to do and build relationships between education and the vendors to know what kind of technologies are out there for us to move forward with research and look at. If you look at the makeup, there was around 60 people at this retreat. We received 42 responses. The makeup of the attendees were mostly education and also vendors, different companies. We had Cisco there. We had Centricom there, quite a few different vendors, and we discussed ways of integrating LTE into our technology infrastructure within the K-12 or K-16 really area of focus. If we look at the session content, it was very rich discussion. I attended as a board member and also as a RESA director because we have the CBRS LTE networks in 2 of our districts that we've been working with UETN and the committee on. And as you look at the session content, very highly rated right there with the responses of the sessions that were put together. Also, if you go to the next slide, this would be, how was your overall experience? Pretty much everybody marked it a 3 or 4. So, feel good with how the overall experience went. And then just a big shout out to Jim Stewart, Corey Stokes, Jeff Egley, Kira Hamilton. I know that I'm leaving a few committee members off. I can't remember all the names that put this together, but it was a good, successful retreat, and I would encourage UETN to continue to support initiatives like this to keep up to date on how things are progressing and as technologies improve. And that is my report on the wireless retreat.
Thank you, Jason. I just think that it's exceptional, especially the high ratings on engagement. The shout out to Jeff, Corey, Jim, Kira, and again, the board members' support of this as well. Do we have any other questions or comments that we would like to add to Jason Strait's remarks? Okay, again, thank you. It's needed. I think that's the thing is these types of things are absolutely needed and necessary for us to really stay cutting edge. Okay, we have another discussion item, And the discussion item is our advisory councils and the reports as well. And so we have Matt McCullough, who's going to provide an update with the Telehealth Advisory Council.
Great, thank you. So the advisory council met last week. We had a great meeting, really good attendance. And first thing we did is elect a new chair and vice chair for the advisory council this coming year. That's one of the things that the advisory council can do according to the bylaws without the board approval. So Michelle McComber was voted to serve as the chair of the advisory council for 2023, and Casey Shakespeare as the vice chair. So we're excited about that. I did call Michelle and clarify with her based on her comments that she made during the board meeting that she's welcome to attend the board meetings and provide an update, but that she's not a member of the UETN board. So Michelle actually gave a really great update about legislation on the Hill right now that's impacting, or at least has a chance of impacting the way telehealth is delivered in the state of Utah. And I just want to mention this because it actually could have quite a big impact, especially in the realm of mental health. The legislature is trying to make it easier for providers to get licensed or to not even have to be licensed in the state of Utah in order to do a telehealth visit with a patient who lives in Utah. And they're doing that because we don't have enough mental health providers in the state. So the more they can open it up and make it easier for mental health providers to practice in the state of Utah is what their goal is with some of the legislation. House Bill 152, House Bill 159, and 166 all deal with licensing and trying to make it easier for providers to practice in the state. So we're following all those bills closely, and Michelle gave a great update on that. I gave a short report, an update on the work that we're doing for the network refresh. We're about 70% complete on upgrading all of the healthcare sites connected to the network to a new, faster 1 gig minimum connection. And we hope to be done with that project by probably around April, once we get all the new switches and firewalls installed. Just two other final things. The NRTRC director gave a report, and this year we're teaming up with the University of Washington and the Behavioral Health Institute to host a behavioral health summit that will be May 9th and 10th. It'll be a virtual conference focused on telebehavioral health. And we're also working on a 3-series quality improvement course for telehealth program administrators. We had 35 people sign up from across the 7-state region and filled up our quota. We only had room for 35 and we got 35 people registered. So that was really great. We have 1 vacancy right now on the advisory council. Eric Packer, who many of you know he's the CEO from the Cedar City Hospital. His term has expired, and so we're looking for a new member to fill that position on the advisory council. And I think that concludes my report from our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Michelle will be a great addition, especially with those mental health bills, the legislation moving forward. I have a question on that. Is that something that will help? So are those like in areas that will be helpful? I know that they have some similar legislation right now for educators, and there's actually one bill out there trying to say that educators don't need a bachelor's degree or whatnot. And some of the, there's some folks that are against it and some folks that are for it. Is there any hesitation on that with the work that you're doing in telehealth to not have some of those baseline or foundational pieces?
Yeah, there is some hesitation, and the Utah Medical Association has pushed back on some of this legislation because it doesn't necessarily protect patients the way that we'd like to. To say anybody can come in and practice behavioral health in the state without a license is not great for patients. I mean, it does increase access, but we don't know anything about these providers. So there is some pushback, and some of the bills have been amended to try to help with that. One of them proposes that they have to get a temporary license in the meantime before they can get their full license approved. So they're working out some of those details, but it's a challenge, right? You want to increase access, but we've got to do it in a careful way.
Is there just one more follow-up question, and then I'll, Jared, I see your hand as well. So would any of these be mental health providers that are working with schools as well? That could possibly within that bill structure?
That's a good question. I think they could be. Right now, the only mental health providers that are working with schools are licensed providers or master's level students at the University of Utah Department of Psychology program who have an agreement with the school districts for individual or group-based therapy. So we're not doing any mental health with students from providers outside the state of Utah.
So there could be minimum expectations if they don't have something. So it could be like a scaled thing. Okay, thank you, Jared.
As long as you're mentioning that, Patty, I'm aware that there is another bill out there related to school psychologists or education psychologists. Maybe you're already aware of it. I don't know the details of it. I'm participating as a member of the new Health Workforce Advisory Council and participating on the Legislative Review Committee. And so some of these bills come up. And Matt, as you mentioned, some of the concerns about the telehealth in the licensing arena there. I'm aware of some of those concerns, but from a UETN standpoint, are there any concerns or opportunities regarding liability as being the carriers of whatever goes on there from the technical side?
Not really from the technical side. I really don't see it as a concern for UETN because we're not in the business of providing care, clinical care. So, our business is to connect, provide the equipment and the technology, and then, both on the hospitals and clinics as well as in schools, we're leaving that completely up to them, how they handle the clinical care that they provide or the partnerships that they establish for that care. So I really don't think any of these directly impact UETN or the network.
They're probably more professional practice or license issues than they are network issues. Thank you.
Yeah, just from a hospital perspective, Jared, I think we would have a hard time credentialing anyone who did not have some form of a behavioral health license, an LCSW, or somebody that's a master's prepared. A bachelor's degree would be, if you've got a bachelor's degree in psychology and maybe you've been working in some sort of mental health capacity for 10 years, maybe, but just to ad hoc not even know what their credentials are and let them counsel, we could not support that type of professional care for patients. You wouldn't even know what kind of training they have or how they would be counseling, and so I would be very reluctant to have a carte blanche to get a license or the ability to do telehealth without a license, without knowing who they are. So.
Any further discussion? And Matt, I appreciate you bringing this information, especially now during the legislative time, so that we have HB 152, 159, and 156 on our radars to, go out within our normal day jobs and be able to see what applies to everyone in this group. So thanks for bringing those to our attention as well.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes, and I want you all to know I recognize that I skipped our amazing executive, director's report. So if we finish the advisory committee updates and then, we have that grand, waiting for that, then would that be okay, Spencer? Okay, thank you. All right, if we have the UEN Advisory Council update.
Yes, thank you. Rick Gasford again. I'm the chair of the Education Advisory Council. We met on January 27th and had a good meeting. And among the items that were discussed are, as you can see in the agenda, we had an update on the legislative session, where it was at, and the request that UEN was making. Of course, this was before they had done their markup and all of that. And so we'll be hearing more, I'm sure, from Spencer here in a few minutes as to where that's gone since then in the last 2 weeks. We thank you for your approval of Mr. Oguz to serve on the advisory council. He's such a wonderful individual and has so much talent, and I just have such great respect for him. And he will certainly give us some good counsel, not just in representing charter schools, but just in good education. The board, the advisory council, also we received a review of the work that we did in the retreat last fall, and we just some follow up on where, what items were the priorities and how those are being incorporated into the work that UEN is now doing. And then we also had a report and particularly on diversity, with the emphasis on goal 3 of that report, which is, or of that policy, which is to empower educators to improve the accessibility of their instructional content through UETN delivered tools such as closed captioning, software, and professional learning on topics such as universal design. And we just received a report on some of the efforts that, particularly in the closed captioning areas, and some of the amount of closed captioning that has been done and will continue to be done as you can see in the numbers on the from their agenda, that they've facilitated 4,758 hours of closed caption media. That's a lot of content, and that so. But it does make all of our getting to the working to get all of our materials so they're accessible to all. We also had a report that I think was of value to the state of software, the various software products that UETN through it does for us, both at the higher education and in public education. Of note is the Canvas contract that was just completed. And it was the RFP for the learning management system, and that was completed with an award to Canvas. I guess we should put it in the proper terms there. But and then there's some of the looming RFPs that are coming up, is particularly for the Utah Online Library. The research materials in that is an RFP that is coming up and will be worked on. And then we also just had a chance to look at the UETN annual report, and just it's a great read just to see all of the great things that UETN is doing on all fronts. And so that's our report on what the advisory council did. We're pleased with where things are going, and we'll continue to be there to advise you on those things that you would like additional information on.
Thanks, Rick. Just all of that important work that you're doing, from the review of the strategic plan, or the review from the retreat, especially. I'm anxious to hear that follow up afterwards of what UETN staff are doing to follow up on those efforts. And that software report out, awesome. The Canvas, I know a lot of people were anxious on that, making sure that that was complete as well. So that's a huge one, because in the Connected Nations report that it was, I think it was the 22 report, it did speak that that was the most useful for our 712 population from all of the LEAs that took that survey, of the 100% of LEAs that took that and went through that. So thank you for going through that as well. Any other questions, comments? I think I just have one question in moving forward with that work from the retreat. Will that be a report out so that we can know some of those efforts that are going on? I would just, or if that would be of interest to the board as well. I don't know, Laura, if that's a question for you.
And what did they say? It was cut for time. It was on today's agenda and then was cut.
Okay,
You can easily
perfect.
add it to a future agenda with your permission.
Okay, so it's a cliffhanger. There we go. All right, and so we will go to the Technology Advisory Council, and Greg.
Thank you, Patty, and good morning, everyone. So I've been on the board about a year and a half or so, and this is the first time we've had a report out on this Technical Advisory Committee. So let me just go ahead and talk about what the committee is and does just for a second. Our last meeting was January 5th, and there were 21 attendees, led by the distinguished Jim Stewart, who is the chair of the committee, and I'm a liaison to the board for that committee. The board can, and Jim, feel free to chime in here if I'm getting something a little bit wrong here. The board consists of UETN members, public ed, higher ed, and a few other partner members that are with us. We hope to meet every month. So far we have, but there may be a few months that we may not be able to meet. The goals of the committee are to look at new technologies and perhaps progressions and enhancements to technologies, and how some of these technologies will be of benefit to UETN agencies. So let me just talk about a couple of the agenda items that we had for this last meeting, again on January 5th. And we do have a meeting, I believe, next week as well. There's been a lot of discussion around esports lately, and really who and where are some of these tournaments being hosted, and really what we're discussing is what's UEN's role in this esports community, and that's really something we're trying to figure out. So there's a big discussion about that. The next agenda item was on discussing 5G and a strategy paper on that. And I'm going to let Jim, he understands that better than I do, so I'm going to let him kind of talk about that detail there. And that's some of the other things we're looking at is instrumentation and AI options. We didn't get to that because of time. And from there, I'm just going to turn the time to Jim, if that's okay with you, Jim.
Yeah, certainly, Greg. Thank you very much. Just to follow up on the 5G, we have a 5G strategy paper that we've developed with the higher ed group, and Steve Hess had asked us to work on that. We really have that completed, but we were looking for some input, and we're also looking for an editor to help us get that edited. So we actually, there was a discussion earlier about ChatGPT, and we were thinking about running our report through that just to see what the outcome would be there, just to help us with that. So if you know a technical editor, we just need some work being done on that, but we are ready to take that back to the CIOs as far as the substance. We're just trying to clean up that format, and we're also having that discussion. We'll be following up next week about that 5G paper, so we're working on that and continue to have those discussions. And we put one or two things on each agenda, but it's really meant to get into some deep technical discussions and something that we enjoy, and we have a bunch of people around us that enjoy that, and so we get into those deep technical briefings and And it means that we're only going to talk about one or two things every time we get together. Greg, anything else you want to follow up with? Does that cover
That's
what
great.
you needed me to?
All right, thanks, Jim and Greg. And that was a fun conversation for anyone who did get on early. We do look forward to that when we talk about the new technologies, progressions, and enhancement. And ChatGPT is definitely one of them. And so we do look forward to what that might look like in our educational pathways or anywhere, just as we move forward. And that esports community is large. There's lots of opportunities for students in that area with pathways for learning as well. So thanks for looking into all of those things in the 5G. I know that USBE, we hire or contract with a technical editor to just do some of our work for us. So I don't know if we can maybe get a name to you, but there's other people out there as well, but we'll try and follow up on that. Any other questions?
Thank you, that would be great.
Yeah, or any other questions or comments? All right, thank you. So we now have the much anticipated report from the executive director. Go ahead, Spencer.
Thank you, Vice Chair Norman. This will be brief, but there's a few things. Let's see, thanks, Jim. A couple things just to recognize. There is some really cool stuff going on among some of our staff. I learned yesterday that Snow College had received an accreditation from the National Association of Concurrent Enrollment Partnerships. This is a higher ed accrediting body. UVU and Weber State are accredited by them as well, but Snow College was specifically accredited for their virtual concurrent enrollment offerings. We know Utah State also does this, so I don't know if they're pursuing this kind of accreditation, but I think it's a nod to our IVC team because obviously Snow College wouldn't be able to do this without the support of our group. So that's, I think, something important to point out. Our professional development team last week was with the Utah Council of Teachers of Mathematics. I think it was 60 plus teachers sharing a lot in our new hub around mathematics. Katie Blunt was also highlighted nationally it's a group called the Study of Knowledge Management and Education Recognition. I think an easier way to describe it is they're a strong advocate for open education resources. She's done some really neat work with the Utah School of the Deaf and Blind in this area, and she was recognized nationally by this group. Laura was appointed to the APTS board. This is the Association of Public Television Stations, the largest national advocacy group for public television. So congrats to Laura. Kelly, she is on the project board for the Utah Broadband Summit here in Utah. That's actually one of the largest in the country. And then also a shout out to our network teams. Last year, this is the network traffic over the last 3 years. And as you can see, each year that network traffic is growing. Our network teams do an extraordinary job in managing the capacity as that network grows, both by locations and by just capacity and traffic. So you see in November there, we hit right up to that 28,000 or 28 petabytes. So it continues to grow, and you can see where it sort of, instead of kind of hitting into a trough, it still climbed during the fall. So we're curious to see where this goes into the spring, but the network, COVID certainly increased traffic, but it continues to grow. So thank you to our network folks. And then also just wanted to mention our Jasmine Valadivia. She is a marketing coordinator here at UETN. She last month was on our sister station, PBS Utah, giving an overview. Laura's put a link in our agenda. I would encourage you all to go watch that video. It's a very good overview of UETN, and Jasmine did a phenomenal job. And if you're interested, she also did one this week on our LitFlix program. But if you're wondering what is UETN, big picture, this is a great video to watch. It's only about 3 minutes, so I'd encourage you to go catch that. And then just shifting gears really quickly to legislative stuff, because that's where we're all at these days. And you touched on a few things related to telehealth. A quick update on our budget priorities. As many of you know, the subcommittees wrapped up their work this week. UETN's priorities, I think, sit very well. You can never take things too much for granted, but as you might recall, our staff equity and retention request was not prioritized or recommended by the governor, so it was not initially part of this committee. Senator Todd Weiler helped us and put in a request for that at 400,000, which was prioritized very high. The combined request for IVC scheduling software, as well as the telehealth cost recovery request on the ongoing side, is 4th out of 21 items on our committee's rankings.
It's getting out of hand.
And then cybersecurity, our one-time request, the $18 million in partnership with the system of higher education, that was ranked 33 out of 80.
Well, I need some for this day.
An open
Requests.
mic on, oh, there we go. Thanks.
And then just a quick update on the software that did not make the list. Certainly, we'd love your direction if you want us to continue pursuing that, but we tried in having some conversations with members of the committee, but just didn't shake it from the tree. So
Which softwares?
that was, I believe, that research software that was added as a priority.
It was
last fall.
the Scribble software that has been used.
Yeah. And then on the legislation side, by and large, from UETN's purely technology and networking perspective, not a lot of bills that directly impact us, but have indirect impact. As we were discussing there with mental health in relation to telehealth. One area is, I think, much more direct is in cybersecurity. There's some legislation this year that establishes a cybersecurity center with the state. UETN will be a member of that. But it does, with all the focus on cybersecurity and the strategy from the higher ed standpoint, coming out of this legislative session, one of the topics I think for the board and for UETN will be cybersecurity as it relates to K-12. Jim and I have had several conversations about this, and I think we'll be going to use some of your technical leads to get that conversation going to ensure we're not doing this in an overly regulatory way, but in a way that's a resource to K-12, I think, where there's a lot of need. So with that, that's kind of a very broad overview. The next couple of weeks, we'll see how the budget starts to shake out. Best wishes to both those of you that are in healthcare and education. There is a lot in those two areas, and I hope if you need UETN's advocacy or help, if I or anyone else can be of assistance, please let us know. We know you're very busy. So with that, happy to take any questions.
I have one question and then a request. My question is on the K-12 software. That's for that Scribble software. So with that, Rick, do you know when the contract is up on that?
I believe it's in August.
Okay, that would be in August. So there would have to be something in place or just a discontinuation of services throughout that. So that's off for sure. Was the reasoning, can you let us know the reasoning on that, if you got any information?
It was a tough conversation when they were asking, when we do so much in software, why specifically an appropriation for this one? And they did ask, it raised a lot of questions too. How does this relate to ones like Canvas or Adobe and others? And trying to explain that, our approach at UETN is, of course, when our stakeholders request it and there's enough interest, obviously if the board prioritizes it, it becomes our priority to push it. And so I tried to raise that to say, this is an extraordinary request because it is a board priority. I would say, candidly, I think the lack of familiarity with the software was one of the challenging conversations to have with legislators. As you know, they're listening to an RFA for Adobe again. They're familiar with Canvas. And so when it comes to education software, my sense was, what is this Scribble software? Candidly, I think it was just that bigger question of what it was.
So perhaps more advocacy between the session next time, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And then I wanted to just say I 100% appreciate the fact that we're doing recognitions. In fact, will you maybe go back to that slide that talks about some of the recognitions with staff? And if we have one moment where everyone turns their camera on, I think this would be it. Because a lot of times I think in any board meeting that you're on or any meeting, we always talk about what are the challenges, what are the stumbling blocks, what comes next. And we just get going to, polish without ever going back to be able to say, thank you so much to everyone who made all of this happen to begin with and who is implementing all of these ideas and thoughts, because implementation is blood, sweat, and tears. And so when we do all of this, I don't care if you want to do a clap like this or something, but I think recognition to all of these amazing people that are getting the work done. So thanks to everyone.
Thank you, Patty.
Yes. Yes, thank you. So we have on here now, as just in our final moments, I'm looking at the clock, and I just, and they're not action items or discussion items as well, but they're items of great, again, blood, sweat, and tears. The annual report, that is super interesting to go through. There's a link to the annual report right there. And I guess if there's any questions, we can forward them on to Spencer and whatnot to move those forward. There's also the recent video productions. And I would say if you're on the train, if you're on, Front Runner or wherever that's at, these are amazing. I started to do this thing where I do a check-in and I kind of try to do some fun, like the UEN and the channels and podcasts and all of that of what UETN is doing. And I'm constantly amazed at the quality and how just frontline they all are. It's this in-time information that just helps you just stay just connected to with what's happening and going on. So I don't know if Laura, if you wanted to talk about some of those videos really quick.
I think the proof is in watching them. We have an amazing production team, and you can tell from the videos that we selected that this is just a few. They're out all around the state now, and I think just doing incredible work. So I'll pass along your compliments too.
Thank you. All right, the final agenda item is our next board meeting, which is February 10th, 2023. That will be a hybrid meeting, meaning those that need to attend virtually or those that need to attend in person. And let's see, any other questions?
Just to clarify, Patty, and it may have been, the next board meeting is April 14th.
April 14th, thank you. Meeting February 10th, that's today. The next one is April. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's all one day
Sorry
to
about
me,
that.
all one day. All right, thank you. I'm looking for a final motion.
Just one issue. TikTok, what's UETN giving any advice on TikTok in view of what the governor's said about TikTok?
So yeah, this question came up, I think, in the Education Council as well. Because we don't license content or we police we don't filter content on the campuses or at the schools. We're certainly not seeing ourselves as the police on this. We're watching it very closely. I think we're looking at possibly things to help instructors and administrators from a professional development standpoint. We certainly, on our network folks and our security folks, see the impact of applications like TikTok on our network. But I think we're also trying to work as closely with your counterpart, Steve, as well as the technical folks in K-12 to understand if there are policies that are going to be implemented that it doesn't adversely impact the network.
Yeah, and I think probably maybe not a policy, but just a heads up as to what they gather. Another third party, if you had on your website some kind of information about that might be helpful. So people that are on the network, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm wondering, we have Brittany Cummins on here as well. I don't know if she has any additional information about intent or depth of the expectations for UETN or schools.
Yeah, I can just share really quick. I think the intent of the executive order from the governor was just to be protective of state hardware and software things. And so there's, because the executive order only applies to state agencies that are governed under the governor, it doesn't go beyond that, although the governor encourages other entities to look at and to negotiate those policies at their governance level as well. And so it's just, the intent was to really just be protective because of the security risks that have been identified with TikTok.
It'll also be interesting to see what the legislature does with social media in general. So,
Yeah, and several K-12 folks, I think, well, most on here probably are aware of, there's a couple of bills. I think the most significant one is HB 311. It's a fairly intricate bill, but it looks like, from what we can tell, it preserves, it's trying to put a focus on social media applications, but not harm other software platforms like learning management systems and other things. But that's can be an interesting needle to thread, if you will. So we'll see where this all goes.
Brittany?
I'm just going to add, I think the governor's perspective is looking at this in three ways. You know, the TikTok conversation was around, you know, security. The social media conversations are around protective pieces for students. And so it's kind of a little bit different, like why TikTok was handled specifically. The concept around the legislation that the governor's supportive and the lawsuit that he has asked to be initiated are more around the ways that social media platforms engage with youth specifically, and just the protective nature of students. And so there's the security around TikTok, and then TikTok is also included, but other platforms as well in regard to protective nature for students in these areas.
Thank you. That was very helpful, especially in moving forward. Anything else? Do we have a final motion?
so moved.
So moved. We have a final motion. It looks like our meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Patty.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Good luck these next few weeks.
We're gonna need it.
Hey, Jason.
Yes.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm going to follow up on the email from last night with our board chair and seeing where that went with the PEA committee.
Okay. And
Okay.
then